players have been standing their ground, and the players have been right this whole time. In order for the WNBA to save this league right now, you have to open the books. Let me repeat, open the books. What's the big deal? Guess what? You open the books and we're wrong? Okay, you know what?
In the insulated, multi-billion-dollar ecosystem of professional sports ownership, there comes a uniquely humiliating moment in every labor dispute. The moment when a workforce begins demanding what it legally cannot compel. When a union exhausts its tangible leverage, when strike threats fail to rattle billionaires who can sit comfortably for years without blinking, negotiations often shift from strategy to spectacle. Emotion replaces arithmetic. Optics replace leverage. And right now, the public narrative around the Women's National Basketball Association feels like it's drifting into that territory. Veteran voices have taken to social media demanding one central, uncompromising action from ownership: open the books. Former superstar Angel McCoughtry framed it as a moral necessity. If the league claims financial strain while revenues appear to explode, then transparency should settle the argument. Open the books. It's a simple phrase, but in corporate reality, it's anything but simple. Privately owned enterprises are not required to hand proprietary financial statements to their employees. Not in retail, not in tech, not in manufacturing, and not in professional sports. Owners are capital providers. They absorb risk. They control accounting structure. Athletes, however elite, are contracted labor, not equity partners. That is the cold, structural reality. But dismissing the players' demand as naive misses the darker layer beneath the frustration. Over the last year, the league has experienced unprecedented visibility, much of it orbiting around Caitlin Clark. Television ratings surged, arenas sold out. A reported $2.2 billion media rights agreement reset expectations. Expansion franchises in Toronto and Portland commanded 9-figure entry fees. From the outside, it looks like an economic boom, yet the salary cap remains tightly controlled. Ownership maintains that operating losses persist. This is where the players' paranoia takes shape, not from entitlement, but from suspicion. Professional sports accounting is complex. Revenue flows
Do everything you ask. So why not open the books?
Because they don't have to. They don't have to. It's the same reason that the owner of Target don't open the books to the person working register number 6. The same reason that the owner of McDonald's isn't opening the books to the guy that's taking your order when you pull up through the drive-thru. It's the same reason. They don't have to open the books for you, okay? They have offered you guys way more money, okay? And you can either take it or leave it. Like at this point, we're over it. Like, we're over it. At this point, I just want them to move on replacement players to be. I don't even care about watching these vets no more. As long as Caitlin Clark and that rookie class and this new rookie class going
through layered corporate structures. Arena rent can be charged internally. Administrative expenses can be inflated. Asset depreciation can legally offset taxable profit. On paper, a league can show minimal net profit while ownership portfolios quietly appreciate. Technically legal, structurally permissible, but to labor, it can feel like a shell game. The demand to open the books is less about auditing spreadsheets and more about confronting what players perceive as asymmetry. If the league's public profile is soaring, why doesn't compensation scale in visible proportion? The tension intensified around league leadership. If executive compensation appears robust while players are told margins are thin, optics alone can destabilize trust. While this public debate unfolded, ownership employed a quieter tactic: silence. During the off-season, communication reportedly slowed dramatically. Weeks passed, deadlines approached, and that silence created pressure, not on billionaires with diversified assets, but on players whose livelihoods depend on seasonal income. Within any union, economic tiers exist. Star players with endorsement portfolios operate differently from role players reliant on base salary. Silence amplifies that divide. Anxiety grows unevenly. Patience erodes at different speeds. It's a classic asymmetry of leverage. Yet transparency concerns are not one-sided. Reports surfaced of agents expressing frustration about limited visibility into negotiation details from union leadership itself. If accurate, that compounds the problem. A union argues.
And I actually think they use the waiting game there as a part of gamesmanship to cause a rift between economic classes, because not every single player in the league can afford to miss the WNBA salary. You know, the owners, that group, they're billionaires. They could sit out the money.
Right.
But there's players here who need their salary.
Exactly. So y'all need to sign a CBA and quit playing game. I don't know why the owner's not making a deal less and less.
Arguing for openness must maintain internal credibility to preserve solidarity. Labor disputes are rarely moral fairy tales. They are power contests structured around leverage, timing, and perception. Ownership does not need public sympathy. It needs structural control. Labor does not need rhetoric. It needs enforceable pressure. Right now, both sides appear to be playing different games. Players are fighting a narrative war, emphasizing fairness, visibility, and moral claim to revenue growth. Owners are fighting a financial war, managing timelines, liquidity, and internal economics. The phrase "open the books" resonates emotionally, but legally compelling it is another matter entirely. The deeper question isn't whether the books will open, it's whether trust can be restored without them. Because once a labor relationship devolves into public suspicion, accusations of hidden profits on one side and accusations of misinformation on the other, the real damage isn't financial, it's institutional. And in professional sports, institutions outlast individuals. This dispute is less about one player, one executive, or one viral soundbite. It is about structural leverage colliding with economic perception in an era where visibility grows faster than compensation. That tension rarely resolves cleanly. It resolves when one side runs out of patience or money, and history shows which side usually has more of both.
The distinction sounds technical, even boring, but it is the fault line beneath this entire conflict. When fans see surging television ratings, sold-out arenas, record-breaking expansion fees, and billion-dollar media agreements, they intuitively assume that player salaries should skyrocket in parallel. The logic feels airtight. If the pie gets bigger, the slices should get bigger. But in corporate accounting, the pie is not always what it appears to be. Revenue is not profit. Profit is not cash flow. And cash flow is not necessarily distributable income. A league can announce a multi-billion-dollar media deal that stretches over a decade, but that revenue is
Said they're receiving from the actual players union. Do you guys address that? See, there's been a lack of transparency from the WNBPA to the players that it's representing and their representation as well, which is why the agents are pissed off and they're not happy. Okay, they feel like the WNBPA has not been giving them the proper information. They've been giving them bits and pieces. You know, when somebody tell you a story and they only tell you the good parts.
Amortized over time. It may be offset by production costs, distribution agreements, revenue sharing mechanisms, and legacy obligations negotiated years prior. Expansion fees can be booked in ways that do not immediately impact annual operating margins. And long-term growth investments, marketing, facilities, staffing, technology infrastructure, can swallow new revenue streams before they ever reach the salary cap. From ownership's vantage point, the argument is straightforward. The league is still in a growth phase. Growth phases require reinvestment. Reinvestment requires restraint. From the player's vantage point, that explanation sounds like a perpetual promise. Not yet becomes a recurring theme. Wait until profitability stabilizes. Wait until expansion settles. Wait until media revenues mature. The waiting game begins to resemble a treadmill, and that is where distrust breeds. The emergence of Caitlin Clark as a commercial catalyst intensified the psychological stakes. Her arrival coincided with a dramatic spike in public attention. Television numbers climbed, merchandise sales surged, ticket demand expanded beyond traditional markets. To many players, this felt like the long-awaited inflection point. But inflection points are interpreted differently depending on which side of the table you sit. Ownership sees volatility. Sudden spikes can fade. Market cycles fluctuate. Star-driven attention can be transient. They are trained to hedge against overreaction. Their calculus prioritizes sustainability over celebration. Labor sees validation. For years, players advocated for increased investment, better marketing, and expanded visibility. When a breakthrough finally arrives, the expectation is immediate reward. These two mindsets collide, not because one is irrational, but because they operate on incompatible timelines. Then there is the structural uniqueness of the Women's National Basketball Association. Unlike standalone leagues that evolved independently, it was incubated within the ecosystem of a larger, more established basketball infrastructure. Shared arenas, shared marketing channels, and overlapping ownership groups create accounting complexities that outsiders rarely understand. When an ownership group also controls the arena in which a team plays, rent is not merely a cost, it is a transfer between entities under the same umbrella. When executive leadership spans multiple sports properties, salaries can be allocated across divisions. When corporate sponsorship bundles multiple assets, valuation becomes layered. To players, these structures feel like smokescreens. To owners, they are standard business architecture. The concept, often labeled Hollywood accounting, looms large in this debate. It refers to legally structuring expenses in ways that minimize visible profit. It is not inherently fraudulent, it is strategic. Film studios famously report losses on blockbusters through internal cost allocations, distribution fees, and creative bookkeeping mechanisms that comply with tax law. The suspicion among players is that similar dynamics exist within professional sports. If the league claims operating losses while expansion franchises command nine-figure entry fees, something appears incongruent. If media rights valuations climb while the salary cap inches upward cautiously, the optics feel misaligned. But optics are not audits. The phrase "open the books" captures a craving for clarity in a system designed around opacity. Yet even if books were opened, the interpretation would require forensic expertise. Financial statements are narratives shaped by accounting standards. They tell stories, but stories filtered through regulatory frameworks and strategic classification. Would transparency resolve the dispute, or would it simply shift the battlefield from emotion to interpretation? Even within labor law, the obligation of financial disclosure is narrower than public rhetoric implies. In certain collective bargaining contexts, employers may be required to provide substantiation if they explicitly claim inability to pay. But inability to pay is a legal threshold, not a moral one. Claiming "we choose not to increase the cap at this time" differs significantly from claiming insolvency. Language matters. Meanwhile, the 6-week silence described earlier illustrates the asymmetry of endurance. Billionaire owners possess diversified wealth. A delayed season, even a canceled season, is a portfolio inconvenience, not an existential crisis. For many players, it is different. Professional athletic careers are short. Peak earning windows are narrow. Each season lost is not merely deferred income, it is irretrievable opportunity.
Unlike corporate executives who can extend careers decades beyond athletic primes, players operate within biological constraints. That urgency magnifies internal pressure. In any union, solidarity is strongest when economic stakes are evenly distributed. But professional sports unions are unique. Star players often earn multiples of league minimum contracts. Some secure endorsement deals that dwarf base salaries. Others depend entirely on league compensation.
When negotiations stall, stress fractures form along those economic lines. Leadership must maintain cohesion across divergent financial realities. Reports of limited transparency between union leadership and agents, if accurate, complicate that cohesion. Agents serve as independent advisors to individual players. If they feel sidelined, mistrust deepens. When information is filtered, even for strategic reasons, suspicion thrives. But unions operate under their own strategic imperatives. Revealing every concession, every counteroffer, and every internal calculation can weaken bargaining leverage. Negotiations often require controlled messaging. Too much internal dissent can empower the opposing side. The paradox is brutal. Transparency strengthens trust, but can weaken negotiation positioning. Secrecy preserves leverage, but risks internal fracture. Ownership understands this paradox intimately. Silence was not merely absence, it was pressure applied indirectly. Time favors capital. And yet, ownership also risks miscalculation. Public perception matters in modern sports economics. Corporate sponsors evaluate brand alignment. Media partners assess narrative stability. Fans respond emotionally to perceived fairness. If players successfully frame the dispute as exploitation during a period of visible growth, ownership could face reputational cost. Reputation does not appear neatly on balance sheets, but it influences long-term valuation. The central tension, then, is not whether either side is entirely right or entirely wrong. It is whether structural leverage aligns with public narrative. Labor's leverage lies in participation. Without players, games do not occur. Broadcast contracts require content. Sponsors require visibility. A strike threatens continuity. Ownership's leverage lies in capital reserves, contractual rights, and structural control. Collective bargaining agreements define mechanisms. Lockouts, while risky, are tools. History across professional sports demonstrates a pattern. Disputes escalate publicly, rhetoric intensifies, deadlines approach dramatically, and at the final hour, compromise emerges slightly above prior baselines. But the context here feels different to many observers because of timing. The league is experiencing heightened attention. Expansion is underway. Media agreements signal ambition. Disrupting momentum now carries greater consequence. Yet momentum cuts both ways. Owners may believe that long-term growth outweighs short-term turbulence. Players may believe that growth amplifies their leverage. The question becomes strategic. Who misreads the moment? If players overestimate their leverage, a prolonged dispute could strain personal finances and erode unity. If owners underestimate player resolve or public sympathy, they risk reputational backlash that undermines brand equity. Complicating matters further is the global dimension. Many players supplement income overseas during the off-season. International leagues offer alternative revenue streams. That diversification can buffer short-term domestic instability, but it also underscores disparities. Some players command lucrative foreign contracts, others do not. Economic heterogeneity challenges collective bargaining discipline. The salary cap itself functions as both shield and ceiling. It creates competitive balance. It constrains payroll inflation, but it also becomes symbolic, a tangible number representing perceived respect. When that number appears small relative to headline revenue figures, frustration intensifies. However, raising a cap is not merely an act of generosity. It restructures cost frameworks. It influences franchise valuations. It impacts future negotiation baselines. Owners calculate not only current affordability, but precedent. Precedent in labor negotiations can be more expensive than immediate concessions. Consider the long arc of professional sports history. In earlier decades, athletes possessed limited bargaining power. Free agency was restricted. Revenue sharing favored ownership.
Over time, unions strengthened, court rulings shifted dynamics, and collective bargaining agreements expanded player compensation. Each shift occurred through confrontation, compromise, and recalibration. This dispute may represent another incremental adjustment rather than a revolutionary rupture, but emotionally it feels seismic because expectations accelerated rapidly. Visibility breeds expectation.